Welcome to the Select Board meeting of Tuesday, March 4th. Please join the board in a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Thank you. Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight's meeting of the Plymouth Select Board is taking place in a hybrid format. Members of the board are joining us here physically at the 1820 courtroom at Town Hall. Members of the public are joining us here in person as well as over the Zoom webinar platform. Members of the public who wish to join the meeting may do so physically or may do so via the Zoom webinar platform. That is included, the login information of which is included on the agenda that is posted on the town website. Members of the public are also reminded that per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of the Select Board after notifying the chair, subject to reasonable requirements of the chair, so as to not interfere with the conduct of the meeting. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any recordings. We are aware of a recording being made by the local scene. We are not presently aware of any other recordings being made. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Flynn. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, gentlemen. I wish to thank you for taking time out of your meeting tonight to allow us to have this brief ceremony of new promotions within the police department. These promotions came about through various means and mainly from the department study we had a year or so ago that recommended some reorganization in the department to allow us to be more efficient and allow us to address some of the new requirements through the regulations post and very new body cam program. So thank you for your time. This evening, we're going to be swearing in 2 new lieutenants and 4 new sergeants. We'll start with Lieutenant Ryan Croak. Lieutenant Croak has been a member of the Plymouth Police Department since 2018 after serving with the town of Rockland for 5 years. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant in 2022 and served as a patrol supervisor. Lieutenant Croak is a member of Metrolux Special Tactics and Response Team. He is a United States Marine Corps veteran, having served both in Iraq and Afghanistan, and currently working towards a degree at Massasoit Community College. He is currently assigned as the midnight to 8 shift commander. Lieutenant Donald Reddington. Lieutenant Reddington has been a member of the Plymouth Police Department since 2016, after serving 2 years with the MBTA Transit Police. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant in 2021 and served as a patrol supervisor, and he is the department's lead firearms, taser, and defensive tactics instructor. Lieutenant Reddington is also a member of the Metrolux Special Response and Special Tactics and Response Team. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran, having served in Afghanistan, and he holds a master's degree in criminal justice. He is currently assigned as the 4 to 12 shift commander. Sergeant Ryan Anderson. Sergeant Anderson has been a member of the Plymouth Police Department since 2012. He has served as a school resource officer, a clinician co-response officer, and is currently assigned to both the Honor Guard and motorcycle units. This year, he completed the necessary training to join the department's training division as both a firearms and taser instructor. He served in the United States Coast Guard and holds an associate's degree in criminal justice, and he is currently assigned as a patrol supervisor. Sergeant James Lopes. Sergeant Lopes has been a member of the Plymouth Police Department since 1997, after serving for a year with the Marshfield Police Department. He is currently assigned to the Prosecution Division as a Discovery Compliance Officer and the Body-worn Camera Manager. He has served as a General Crimes Detective, DEA Task Force Officer, School Resource Officer, and maintains a position on the Mountain Bike Unit. Sergeant Lopes holds a Master of Science degree in Criminal Justice Administration. Sergeant David Ross. Sergeant Ross has been a member of the police department since 2006 and is currently assigned as a patrol supervisor. He previously served as a narcotics detective, general crimes detective, street crimes officer, and a DEA task force officer. Sergeant Ross is a deputy commander of Metrolux Special Tactics and Response Team and serves as a department firearms and use of force instructor. He is a United States Army veteran, having served in Iraq, and holds a master's degree in criminal justice. Sergeant Brendan Ricks. Sergeant Ricks has been a member of the Plymouth Police Department since 2019 and is currently assigned as a patrol supervisor. He previously served as a field training officer and mountain bike officer, and he recently received his certification as a departmental firearms and taser instructor.
Gentlemen, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will bear true faith and allegiance to and will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that I will fairly and equitably execute the laws thereof within the extent of my authority and jurisdiction. So help me God. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as, state your rank, of the Town of Plymouth Police Department, and I will obey and be bound by such rules and regulations as now are and may be, from time to time, established for the government of the Town of Plymouth Police Department. So help me God. I state your name. Hereby accept the position of, state your rank, in and for the Town of Plymouth Police Department of the Town of Plymouth. Congratulations.
Mr. Chairman, this concludes our portion of the ceremony. I would like to thank you and the rest of the board for your time this evening. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Senator Dylan Fernandez, who has been kind enough to provide citations for each of these gentlemen for their accomplishments. Thank you. And if you may indulge us, Mr. Chair, if we could get some pictures with you and the rest of the board and their family members.
Yes, if you like, sure.
Thank you.
Take a recess.
We'll take a 10-minute recess. Welcome back. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing. In accordance with Chapter 138 of the Massachusetts General Laws as amended, notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held at Plymouth Town Hall, 26 Court Street, on Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, at 6:15 p.m. to consider the application for a new annual all-alcohol restaurant license from Dillon's Kingston Incorporated, doing business as Local Provisions, 295 Court Street, Colin Dillon, manager. Description of the premises is as follows. 1,257 square feet, one floor, two entrances, exits. Front entrance leads to a long, narrow bar area where all food and drink will be served. Back room for prep and kitchen space. Anyone wishing to be heard on this matter should plan to attend this meeting. I now declare the hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application? Is anyone online, Jade? No? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Seeing none. Colin, did you want to say a few words? No, you need to come up to the microphone.
Go up to the mic.
Hi, I'm Colin Dillon. I own Dillon's Local in Plymouth right now. We are trying to expand our business a little bit. And we're just hoping to open a little neighborhood pub around the corner and have some decent food and just have a little bit of fun, but not too much. Yeah. That's about it.
Mr. Blitzer?
I just need permission to speak, so. Colin, what are your plans for, like food? Similar to what you're doing, at Dillon's?
Well, we don't want to cannibalize ourselves, but we're gonna do similar food, but not the same food. I mean, that'd be silly to be that close and we're
Right.
trying to stay open a little bit later, not too late. It's tough to get a bite to eat in this town late night.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. Hopefully we're gonna do some takeout, do some good sandwiches. I got some other ideas that, and just keep it small and quaint.
Right.
Nothing crazy though.
Yeah, so I'm sure you could, there's a lunch trade down there.
I think so.
Yeah, I would think that people would be excited to, it's a good option for a lot of the businesses along there, so.
Well, and I've noticed during the business hours, most of the on-street parking is taken up because there's so many businesses, which is good for me. And then at night, it really clears out. So we'll have some parking for if people want to come and try us out afterward, afterwards. So I think it's going to work out. I
Yeah.
hope so.
Perfect, I'm excited for you. Just don't do pizza. No, I'm just kidding.
No, actually, don't worry. We're doing pizza.
That's a joke. Anyway, good luck, Colin. Good luck.
Thanks, guys. I
What's your time of opening? When are you trying to get open?
Well, once it goes up to the state level, I'm just gonna be waiting on that. So I'm just trying to clean the place up, put some lipstick on it, make it look decent, So hopefully early May,
Perfect.
fingers crossed.
Good luck.
I appreciate
luck.
it. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, I now declare the hearing closed. Bring it back to the board.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application as presented for local provisions.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Blitzer, second by Mr. Canty. Discussion? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes?
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney? Yes. And I'm going to abstain. Thank you. 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Administrative notes, we have 4.
Mr. Chairman, unless my colleagues have any questions or want to take anything individually, I would make a motion to approve admin notes 1 through 4 as a group at this time.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion or comments? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes?
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes, unanimous. North Plymouth Central Traffic Study. Welcome, Mr. Downey. And Mr. Coyle.
Thank you, Chairman Quintal and Select Board. For the record, my name is James Downey, the Assistant DPW Director, and I'm here tonight with Bill Coyle, our DPW Director, GPI, our Traffic Consultant, and representatives from Precinct 3, who have all been instrumental in the creation and completion of this study. Just a little history. Back in May of 2023, Precinct 3 went to town meeting with an article for funding for the traffic study, which was approved by town meeting. With the funding, the DPW has hired GPI, whom we have worked with in the past, on many other transportation improvement and traffic-related projects throughout town. This study, which we are about to present, has taken almost 2 years to complete, which is a little longer than originally estimated, but I'm excited to be here tonight and present to you the Plymouth Center and North Plymouth Circulation and Mobility Study. We have Nicole Rogers from GPI, who will walk you through from the beginning. Nicole has been involved from the start and has played a key role throughout the process. Before I hand it over to Nicole, I would also like to add, at the end of the presentation, we will be open for questions and then present a short list of streets which we feel are ready to move to the next steps. With that, I'll hand it off to Nicole Rogers.
Do you think there's any way to like zoom that up a little bit because he's getting cut off? If that's an option. Thank you. Just want to make sure you guys get the full view of everything here.
In order for everybody here, you have, at home, you have to speak really close to the mic, just,
Thank you. Is this good?
yeah, they can hear you now, yeah.
Awesome. All righty. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for making time on your agenda for us tonight. We're here to present our final findings for the Plymouth Center and North Plymouth Circulation and Mobility Study. My name is Nicole Rogers, like James said, and sorry, technical difficulties. Gotcha. Okay. Back at it. Okay, my name is Nicole Rogers. I'm here on behalf of GPI. We are the engineering consultant. We're out of Wilmington, Mass. I'm joined tonight by my colleague John Diaz here. And like James said, we've been working really closely with the DPW and the folks at Precinct 3 to really put this plan forward. I'd also be remiss as to not thank the residents of Plymouth, as their feedback has been really instrumental throughout the entire process. So many thanks to the entire community. Just a quick agenda for tonight. I'm going to give some brief background. Project info will touch on the existing conditions analysis as well as the community input, which collectively really helped us shape this plan. We'll also touch on some of the needs and opportunities, and then I'll get into the nitty-gritty with the recommendations and how do we move this plan forward. And then, like James said, we'll open things up for some questions. So just study background, this is our study area. I'm sorry, this is getting cut off again, but no worries. This is really focused on the North Plymouth and Plymouth Center neighborhoods. Generally, the study is bound by Obery Street to the south, the waterfront to the east, the Kingston Town Line to the north, and Route 3 to the west. The area itself includes, the historic downtown, the surrounding residential neighborhoods, and key regional corridors such as Route 3A. This area in Plymouth in general, as I'm sure you're all aware, has experienced a lot of growth, specifically within the last 10 years, and that is expected to grow even more over the next 20 years, specifically as we talk about population and employment. So what does that mean for the transportation network? I'm sure you guys are already feeling it. There's a bit of a strain on the transportation network. You have congestion that is starting to displace speeding vehicles into the neighborhoods. A lot of these streets that are not capable to kind of accommodate this influx of traffic. As you'll see throughout this presentation, that speeding is really a big root issue throughout the entire area. It's causing residents to actually park on the sidewalks, and therefore you have a lot of pedestrian mobility and safety concerns as well. So definitely there's a need for safe and walkable and bike-friendly streets in Plymouth, and that's exactly why we're here today. Like James mentioned, this project was initiated by Precinct 3 and approved by town voters back in May 2023. Just to give a little bit of background, an informational public meeting was held back in August 2023 and a public open house meeting back in April 24. So essentially, this study is really looking at more of a holistic approach. So really looking at this in terms of, an area-wide study, trying to find out those systemic issues and really develop, some toolboxes to really get down to the root causes of these issues. And of course, we've also identified over 60 projects within this report as well. So definitely an area-wide study, but we do drain down and get into very specific locations. So our existing conditions, this is kind of an iterative process. We go through all of the existing plans and policies that Plymouth has, and then we do a very comprehensive data analysis. So I'll start, this is what you call street classification. This is really important when we start to look at different roadways. This kind of helps us assign a different role to each roadway within the network. So if I look at, Route 3A, I know that that's going to be providing regional access, it's going to be providing access to a lot of different land uses, and it's going to be carrying a generally much higher volume of traffic compared to, say, that of a local road. So this is really important just to get that context behind these different roadways as we start to kind of identify potential countermeasures. You want your countermeasures to align with the function of the road. So for example, if I want to put pedestrian safety measures on Route 3A, they need to be more robust than that of, a local roadway. This also comes into play when we're looking at volume estimates, right? So comparing the volume estimates to the general classification of a road, we're able to kind of pinpoint some of those potential areas for cut-through traffic. So these volume estimates, these are taken from Replica, which is a big data source. So these are very planning level estimates, but they do, provide some good insight as to just typical traffic patterns throughout the area. So if I were looking at this as a planner, I can really pinpoint right off that westerly road to Standish to Hall. That's a pretty big cut-through route. This is something that's very, graphically displayed on this map here. We also took a look at the multimodal network. So what I mean by that is we're looking at our transit, we're looking at bike lanes and facilities, and we're looking at the sidewalk network. So public transit in Plymouth, you have a good mix of, public and private. There are some shuttles. You have the GATRA that provides service throughout town. So really making sure that we're honing in on those transit stops and routes and making sure that there's walkable ways to actually access these facilities and services. Bike infrastructure, pretty limited within this area. The only bike lanes that we actually have on road are on Water Street, and you'll see maybe those bike lanes aren't doing the job that they really need to, basically just because, they're located right next to a parking lane and people are backing right out into those bike lanes. You also have the Seaside Rail Trail, which is a great facility for the community, but it's kind of, there's not a lot of good connection to it. So that's definitely something that we've pinpointed as well. And then the sidewalk network. So this area of Plymouth is generally pretty walkable. There's sidewalk on most of the streets, at least on one side. However, condition does vary quite considerably. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of cars parked on sidewalks, and therefore the sidewalk condition is going to degrade over time because of that. There's also a few gaps in the network as well, and I'll kind of touch on those a little bit, but essentially roadways where sidewalks don't exist that are really creating a barrier to accessibility and connectivity to some of those key destinations. Like I mentioned, the Seaside Rail Trail, and then some surrounding neighborhood schools, parks, things like that. So I did mention this residential parking. This is something that we haven't really seen in a lot of other communities. But as I was driving out all last summer, the summer before, trying to get a lay of the land, and this is very, very common within Plymouth. So at first we were like, what the heck, what's going on here? And then we really start to drill down into the data, and we're finding that speed is the very root cause for most of the issues that are going on in Plymouth. And this is where we get into our safety assessment here. So we pulled crash data. This is from the Mass DOT crash portal for the last 5 years. I believe this was 2018 to 2022, the most complete recent 5 years. There were about 1,400 collisions throughout this study area, and you'll see that speed-related collisions amounted for 8% of the total collisions. Now, compared to the statewide average, which is about 5, that's almost double. So this is a very clear sign that speeding is most certainly an issue. We also looked at, speed-related collisions often result in more severe outcomes. So we look at the severity kind of average here. 31% of the total collisions in Plymouth resulted in injury. Compare that to the 24% statewide. That's another anomaly there. And we also ended up mapping all of these collisions as well. So this is kind of a heat map. So areas that have that yellow, those are where crashes are more frequently occurring compared to those in that kind of muted purple. So what are we seeing here? Definitely a high frequency within your downtown area. Obviously there's a lot going on. There's a lot of on-street parking. There's just a lot of traffic down there. That's kind of to be expected. A lot of those crashes are less severe. So that's good, but definitely a high frequency in that area. We're also seeing like up here in the top left, that other kind of retail section within Route 3, also seeing a high frequency of collisions. Breaking this down by intersections, we see a high frequency at Cherry Street at Standish Ave and Standish Ave at Hall and Liberty, which I drove by today. We've been working with James, and it's really nice to see that all-way stop control has gone in there. So we'll be looking to see an evaluation as to if the crashes go down there. So definitely some great work already being done. This was also broken down to look at pedestrian-related crashes. So once again, a very high frequency within this downtown Route 3A section. Also to be expected, a lot of businesses, a lot of crossings, that's where people are walking. This is actually a Mass DOT high pedestrian crash cluster, which makes it eligible for HSIP funding. So this is a great candidate to push a project through the TIP to bring about some pedestrian safety and mobility changes here. We're also seeing quite a bit of pedestrian-related crashes at Summer Street, at Oak Street, and I'll kind of touch on that, but it's located right around a curve, really limited sight distance, a lot of speeding going on there as well, so another high point area. And once again, we did it for bicyclists as well, so these are all the bicycle-related collisions. You see quite a bit on Water Street, and like I mentioned, that is the only street with bike lanes, but there is a lot of activity going on there, so potentially looking to restructure Water Street to improve those bike conditions there. We also see a high frequency on Route 3A and Summer Street. Neither of those roads have bike facilities on them. Clearly there's a demand, and there's a lot of key destinations along these corridors. So definitely looking in terms of corridor-wide projects, how do we implement bike-friendly initiatives on these roadways? So public input, like I mentioned, we did have an informational session back in August 2023, and then a public forum in April 2024. Ongoing throughout this entire process, we had an online survey where folks could actually go in and pinpoint their concerns right on a map. So overall, we had 225 different people respond to that survey. As you can see here from this graph, speeding concerns, by far the top one concern, followed by road safety concerns, so thinking about dangerous intersections, curves, places where there's poor visibility, and then lastly, unsafe pedestrian crossings as well, specifically within the downtown area. And similar to what we did with those crashes, we did this for all of the public comments as well. So from right here, I can see very quickly where those community hotspots are. Obviously within your downtown areas, but now we start to see some other streets. Nelson Street, this was the #1 cited street, followed by Standish Avenue. You have Summer Street as well. All of these streets really coming up as pedestrian safety concerns, and once again, a lot of speeding concerns. Also within this downtown area, the intersection of Route 3A at Water Street and Sandwich Street, that's a pretty tricky one, as well as Market at Pleasant Street. Those kept coming up as well, and you'll see later on that we've actually pulled those out of the report and provided some conceptual improvements for those intersections. Now, getting into our needs and solutions. So taking all of that data, and trust me, I just showed you a tiny, tiny bit of the data that we did pull, as well as all of that public outreach, there were 3 key themes that kept coming up. Number 1, speeding. Number 2, pedestrian and mobility safety issues. And lastly, traffic flow and circulation issues. So moving forward, I'm going to show you all of the streets that kind of coincide with each of these issues, and then a potential toolbox to fix each of these issues. So once again, kind of looking at things at a more holistic approach before we start diving down into those location-specific areas. So speeding, these are all of the roadways that we saw some recurring speeding issues throughout our data, as well as the public input. Some notable ones: Standish Ave, Nelson Street, Oak Street, Summer Street, South Street. All of these roads keep popping back up, right? We also see Route 3A, specifically as you're approaching the downtown from the south. These are kind of what we call transition zones, where you're coming from, you know, a different context and you're driving into the downtown area, so you're carrying a little bit of speed with you. So those are definitely areas we want to focus on. So like I mentioned, kind of these Pleasant, Oak, Standish, Nelson, what do these all have in common, right? A lot of them have these really long, straight alignments, and some of them are pretty wide too. So when you're driving, that just gives you the perception that you can speed quite a bit. And these happen to be the roadways where a lot of parked vehicles are getting hit as well. You have that kind of yellow center line, so you kind of feel constrained, but there is actually enough room to have a parked vehicle and have 2 lanes of traffic. So just reallocating space appropriately. So here we get into our speed management toolbox. So like I mentioned, kind of looking at things from a more holistic approach, there are several types of speed management tools. These kind of are those low impact, low cost measures. One thing that the town may want to consider is implementing a town-wide 25-mile-per-hour speed limit within thickly settled areas. This is something that's very common across Massachusetts these days. You'll also see down at the bottom here, these are those dynamic speed feedback signs. I was driving on Standish. I was happy to see one put in there as well. But, you know, integrating these measures in very strategic places can be very helpful. You also have, you know, just existing roadway characteristics such as street trees and on-street parking and two-way traffic that just naturally calm traffic. So those are all great things. We also come into some of our more expensive or more intrusive measures, and these are, you know, a combination of horizontal and vertical deflection measures. So you have neck downs and curb extensions that kind of narrow the roadway down. You have chicanes, which kind of create a natural curvature to the roadway, tightening curve radii, you know, just slowing down turning speeds, reducing crossing distances, and then raised intersections and crosswalks, which give a little bit of vertical deflection, and as a driver, you kind of slow down. Also, those median islands and pedestrian refuge areas, those not only narrow the roadway, but reduce your crossing distances and provide refuge for pedestrians crossing multiple lanes of traffic. I don't know if this mouse just died or something. Sorry. Yeah, that's perfect. All right, on to pedestrian safety and mobility concerns. So once again, taking all that data, all that public outreach, these are some of the key areas. As you can see, that downtown area, that's a big one. So definitely honing in on these corridors. You also see some dots there. Those are reflecting intersections that have some pedestrian crossing concerns as well. We can move forward to the next slide. But once again, looking at these kind of areas, these are really broken down into 3 categories. One are crossing concerns. So within your downtown area, you have a couple of mid-block crossings. You have vehicles parked close to the crosswalk, so it really obstructs the visibility there. We also have sidewalk condition. Like I mentioned, the parking on the sidewalks, there are some areas where your sidewalks are in poor condition. That limits a lot of accessibility as well. If you have a car parked on the sidewalk, someone with a disability can't maneuver around it. So that's another big issue. And lastly, sidewalk gaps. Like I mentioned, there are a few areas specifically kind of bringing connectivity to the Seaside Rail Trail, as well as some other neighborhood sidewalk gaps, and I'll kind of touch on those in a bit. But once again, kind of coming up with a toolbox, a list of countermeasures that we can look at. So within the report, there's something called a step guide. I'm really sorry, here we go. There's something in the report called a step guide. So essentially, you can kind of see on the left here, these are measures for mid-block crossings that the town can consider as, these requests come in. So on a low volume, low speed roadway, simple signage might suffice. But as volumes increase and as speed increases, your measures are going to be more robust. So you can start introducing things like raised crosswalks and RFBs, which are those flashers, and then curb extensions to reduce the crossing distances, and in the most extreme cases, hawk signals. I don't know if there's going to be any hawks going around Plymouth yet, but it's something to consider. So on the right here, you can kind of see a couple of those measures all combined. You have a raised crosswalk, you have the RFBs, you have a raised median. So these things collectively not only slow traffic down, but improve visibility for pedestrians. And then lastly, traffic flow concerns. So obviously, Plymouth has been experiencing a lot of congestion, and that means that a lot of these vehicles are now dispersing into neighborhood roads. So like I mentioned, some of these roads are super narrow, they can't really accommodate that. And then others, you have the issue of people parking on the sidewalk because they feel like it's too constricted. So a part of this study was us evaluating this Route 3A Water Street one-way pair approach. This is something that's been floating around for decades at this point, so we kind of wanted to come in with a fresh set of eyes and look at this analysis. So we did ultimately lay this out on both roads, and you'll see there's this thing called EVA equals 20 feet. This is emergency vehicle access clearance. We need to have 20 feet of access on Route 3A and Water Street. They're both major arterials, and therefore, your pavement to pavement width, you have a lot of useless pavement now. You have your head-end angled parking, and you have to have enough room for those vehicles to back out and still have, traffic go by. So really, there's not much benefit to it, and we kind of start looking at this in terms of a lot of different things, right? We're looking at travel time and congestion. We're looking at how does this affect the surrounding roadway network if you go one way. Looking at pedestrian and bike safety. So you would think that one-way traffic would be better, but it actually isn't because people are just so focused on going forward that they're not really considering what's going on in their peripheral. Transit routes and school bus routing. You have a lot of private shuttles going through this area. To have them kind of reroute all their stuff, that's another deterrent. Parking supply. So we do get about 5 additional parking spaces if you were to convert to the one-way, but those are actually located in areas with pretty low demand. So you're not really getting that bang for your buck. And then emergency response, which ended up being, the deterrent to kind of nix this idea. It's really not recommended. And then business exposure visibility. If you go one way, this kind of creates your downtown more as a throughway than somewhere, where people want to be slowing down and interacting with the local businesses. So all these to consider. Therefore, we would recommend against the Route 3A Water Street one-way pair. However, you do see that there are a lot of other roadways here that have been identified as traffic flow concerns. So for example, you have a lot of those presidential kind of neighborhood roads, a lot of those downtown roads. You can see these are very, very narrow roads. These were built, really before the automobile. So definitely things to consider. There's a lot of parking demand in some of these areas, so you definitely start to feel a little bit more constricted in there. There's, a lot of cut-through traffic, and then there's, the risk for those side swipe collisions. So to kind of evaluate those remaining roadways, we can start looking at, curb to curb width, parking supply and demand, emergency vehicle access, the surrounding land use, looking at the surrounding network impacts, and then speed and safety. So if you were to go one way on a more wide roadway, that would just inherently promote more speed. So that's not something we want to do. Really looking at this more on a balanced scale here. So we did go through, so all of those roads minus Route 3A and Water Street, we did look at, a feasibility. So we did essentially a pre-screening looking at all that evaluation. So I'm not going to go through all of these here, but you'll see that, within the report, there are preliminary recommendations as well as potential treatments for each of these roads. So these ones are deemed infeasible. There are a couple of different reasons why that might be. One, the function of the road. If it's an arterial, you're going to have a lot of traffic being dispersed once again into other neighborhood roads. So we don't want to displace the existing traffic issues. Two, if it's already wide enough, like I mentioned before, if you were to go one way, that's just going to promote more speed. That seems to be the root issue in Plymouth, so we don't want to do that either. So it's really just all a balancing act. And then you will see another list of infeasible here that we did provide, alternative treatments for these roadways that aren't feasible. That could include kind of shifting your parking from side to side through a chicane effect. So essentially you would create little parking bays on one side and then switch them to the other side. So vehicles kind of have to, naturally curve their way through and slow down vehicles while you maintain your parking supply. Now, there were a couple of other roadways. Sorry, this mouse once again. I don't know if it's not in the range or, oh, here we go. It's just very finicky. Thank you. So now we have a list of feasible roadways, right? So based on those evaluation criteria, we start looking at some of these different ones. You have Chilton and Clifton, Fremont Street, that's one that came up, Ocean View Avenue. All these roadways are deemed eligible. And once again, you can kind of see the evaluation that we're looking at. So classification, that curb to curb width, what is the parking like out there? Is there high parking? Is there low parking? And then looking at potential treatments, right? So it might be eligible, but is that the right solution? So really looking at, that balancing act once again. If we go to one way, you lose, full functionality of the roadway. You have to do some detours. And then if you maintain that two-way, you get rid of some of the parking. So it's kind of always going to be a little bit of a trade-off here. I apologize. I'm just going to go to my notes here. Now we're finally at some recommendations. I know it kind of sounds like I already gave you a lot of recommendations, but mostly we're broken up into town-wide programs and policies, and then we're going to get down into those, specific locations. So part of this study was really looking at all of the existing plans and policies that are already in place within Plymouth, but we were able to identify a few gaps that would essentially, maybe hinder implementing this plan in the future. So as you can see, I'm just really going to focus on the latter three, but crosswalk installation policy and program. There were a lot of requests for crosswalks to be installed throughout the area. You definitely need to have a policy and a procedure in play to make sure that crosswalks are really only being installed where it's safe to do so and where it's appropriate to do so. Enforcement and public education. Speeding is a big one, parking on sidewalks, another big one, but we realize that those resources aren't always readily available, and your residents need somewhere to park, right? They shouldn't be, anyways, parking management strategies, sorry about that. I couldn't come up with a word. Parking management strategies, right? So really recommending that the town look at different strategies to get people off the streets parking. And another thing of that is installing wayfinding signage to get your visitors and that seasonal influx off your on-street parking and into off-street lots. Updating the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan. This is something that we recommend a lot of towns to do, just making sure that it's reflecting your current needs, and this report is a great way to update that. And then lastly, like I mentioned prior, integrating that 25-mile-per-hour thickly settled speed limit. So then focusing on our traffic flow request program. Like I mentioned, we did have all of those eligible roads, right? They need to go through a standardized process. So kind of coming up with this program. So essentially a resident would submit a request to have traffic flow converted, right? That would have to go through a feasibility evaluation up front to make sure that it's eligible, and then it would have to get a butter support. So a thing that we do a lot in traffic calming policies, and I'm going to touch on that too, but that requires a street and residents to get a certain percentage of approval, a butter approval. Therefore, it makes it a lot easier for the DPW to kind of come in and make that change when they already have the support backing. So then, the DPW could go in and make that a temporary one-way, evaluate that for, a couple months. If things are going well, make that a more permanent condition. And then there's also a recommendation for a traffic calming policy and program. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of requests for speed management throughout the study area. So coming up with a way to take those requests and standardize them is a great recommendation here. It would be very similar kind of to the traffic flow program where, a citizen makes a request, it goes through an initial pre-screening phase, to ensure that there's enough volume and speeding is actually an issue to, instigate these measures, and then going through that abutter support. And then the town can actually go back to that speed management toolbox that we came up with and pick a measure that's appropriate for that road. Once again, kind of implement it. That could be on a temporary basis, do a little bit of evaluation, and then go ahead and make that a permanent fixture. And then also adopting a street topology system. So I kind of started this presentation with that street classification map, right? That kind of defines the role of a road within the network. We kind of wanted to do that for Plymouth, but make it a bit more tailored to Plymouth. So we're looking at a bunch of things, vehicle volumes, multimodal demand, we're looking at speed, land uses that are typically served, as well as typical parking utilization. So you'll see that we've kind of developed these different topologies. And if you go forward, John, you'll see that different cross-sections have been developed for each of these groupings. So therefore, once a project comes in, the town can kind of go through, look at that map, and be able to quickly identify, some cross-sectional balances that are appropriate for that street. So you can kind of see on one side, you have two-way flow, parking on one side that's chicaned, or you could go, if you have a little bit more room, have parking on both sides, but implement curb extensions at key locations throughout the corridor to slow down speeds. And then we get into our projects. So projects, identifying these, it's pretty an iterative process. Like I mentioned, we're going through all of those existing plans and studies that have already been developed, pulling out any plans that are ongoing, as well as taking all of our data analysis. So looking at our safety data, looking at all of the community input, pedestrian generators, multimodal demand, parking, we're looking at that gap analysis. And I love the graphic on the right because it really visualizes the process pretty well. We're essentially taking all of those layers and overlaying them together to be able to pinpoint where those key areas are. So if you go to the next slide, John, you'll see, and I've mentioned these roads throughout this entire process. We have identified some key priority corridors. They include Route 3A, Nelson Street, Standish Ave, Allerton, Birch Avenue, Cherry Street, Oak Street, Summer Street, Water Street. So it's recommended that these corridors be streamlined for further study and engineering design. And I'll kind of touch on the three in red. So Route 3A, like I mentioned, it's a regional arterial, but it also provides access to your, historic downtown. So it sees a lot of traffic. And as you can see kind of through this graphic here, it goes through a lot of different varying contexts. So on the outskirts, you kind of have those building setbacks and your travel lanes are a little bit wider. There's not parking on both sides. So you kind of have that perception that you can speed through these areas. But now you're speeding towards your downtown where you have a lot of pedestrian activity, a lot of on-street parking, just a lot going on. You'll also see kind of these pinpointed areas throughout. A lot of mid-block crossings throughout 3A that are kind of blocked by parked vehicles, making that, a key concern. There's a request for speed management throughout. And then kind of, if you go to the next slide, John, we've really decided to pull out, like I mentioned, that downtown area. So as I referenced before, this is a pedestrian crash cluster within Mass DOT's crash database, which makes it HSIP eligible for funding. So we decided to go in through here, and it's kind of hard to see on this, but within the report, hopefully you can get a better view. But really, making some modifications for pedestrian safety. So a lot of curb extensions, RRFBs, tightening up intersection realignments. And then we're really focusing on that Route 3A at Water Street and Sandwich Street. You'll see that we kind of provided two different alternatives. One's a non-signal, one is a signal, but it removes that two-stage pedestrian crossing, which really holds up a lot of the delay that's occurring there today. So hopefully making a change there kind of improves some of the flow and efficiency throughout Route 3 as well. Nelson Street, like I mentioned, this was the most referenced street within the public input. You can see it's a pretty long, straight alignment. It has wide travel lanes, and therefore a lot of speeding vehicles. We did see some cars parked on the sidewalk out here as well. If you're familiar with Nelson, it does have this little horizontal, or big, I should say, horizontal curve right at the end, and then you have two crosswalks at either side. So that curve really limits your visibility here. I've heard from several residents that people come around that curve and then gun it down. So that's really creating a significant safety concern out there. There's also a lot of heavy bike and pedestrian volume out there. You have the Seaside Rail Trail, you have the beach there, so people park and then walk. So definitely coming up with some mitigated measures here. So moving on, this is kind of just a initial concept recommendation that we made. At the top, you can kind of see the existing cross-section, wide lanes. So we're proposing to narrow those lanes down, slow vehicles down, actually create parking bays and chicane them as well. So you're kind of creating that natural little curvature throughout the roadway, really slowing vehicles down while also maintaining some, significant parking there as well. Standish Avenue. This is has significant safety issues out here. We went through some of the crash data that James gave us. We saw, vehicles hitting houses, vehicles hitting parked cars, speeding, definitely an issue out here. Once again, you have those long straight alignments that's really promoting that natural speeding to occur. Cars being hit on the sidewalk. A lot of heavy bike and pedestrian activity due to the schools and parks out there as well. So Standish Ave really paints itself as, a great candidate for a corridor-wide project. And we actually did quite a deep safety assessment at Standish. Pretty kind of crazy out here. We calculated all the crash rates within the segments as well as the intersections. And if you don't know, a crash rate is essentially the amount of crashes per the million entering vehicles within an intersection or segment. So it kind of really allows us to compare apples to apples. And what we do typically is compare that to statewide and district-wide averages, and you'll see all of the areas in red here are exceeding both of those averages and by a lot. So Also to mention, I did drive down Standish earlier. I saw kind of the traffic improvements that have been put in at the Alden Street intersection, as well as the all-way stop at Liberty and Hall. So we'll kind of monitor that crash data as, some time goes on. But there's also, these areas down towards the left of this graphic and up towards the right where those segments are very much exceeding those safety averages. We also took a look and found that there were 16 instances of vehicles hitting parked cars. That is wild. That's pretty significant. That is not even including the crashes into homes. So definitely indicating a pretty significant safety concern out here. And then moving on, John, there were also 2 instances of crashes with vulnerable users. So that includes pedestrians and bicyclists, one of which was a school-aged child. You do have, schools nearby on Standish, so this is definitely a very high priority corridor. And then you can move on, John. So essentially, we're taking, an area-wide look at this. Like I mentioned, those curb extensions went in at Alden Street, the all-way stop at Liberty and Hall. We're also, recommending some curb extensions in strategic locations, but we're also looking at the overall cross-section of this roadway as well. Go ahead, John. And therefore, we looked at 3 different alternatives. Really, this is a matter of that balance again, right? What users do we want to prioritize, and where do we want to prioritize that? So option A is really just striping, parking lanes. That's not really going to get you too much. Option B is to kind of chicane that parking lane and narrow in the pavement width so that, your vehicles are kind of doing that natural curvature again. And then option C would to be restrict parking to one side and then create a shared use path on the school side. Therefore, you're really prioritizing your pedestrians and your bicyclists within this corridor that has a lot of schools and parks nearby. And then in addition to those priority corridors, like I mentioned, there were a lot of requests for speed management throughout the entire area. So we're looking at some targeted traffic calming. I won't list all of these roadways, but one that came up was Westerly Road, specifically at Liberty Street. This is a wild one too. We looked at the crash data here. A lot of instances of folks really just traveling right through that intersection and hitting the house at the end there. So really just, looking at some low-cost targeted issues here that can really make a big difference. And then go on, John. And then next we have, quick build deploy. So within those kind of traffic calming things, that speed management toolbox, there are opportunities to do some quick builds or pilot demonstrations. So you can kind of see with chicanes, just through those kind of sandbags, plastic flex posts and pavement markings, kind of things like that, that are really small but can make a big difference in the immediate term. And then intersection improvements, there were a lot of intersections that came up. I'm not going to mention all of them, but as you can see, like a lot of intersections within the study area have some interesting geometry. It's kind of unclear who has the right of way a lot of times, and they create these very large intersections. So really, really long pedestrian crossings, these really large curve radii that encourage a lot of high-speed turns. So really looking at a lot of these intersections and pulling out, some common themes there. Introducing curb extensions, tightening up those curve radii to slow those speeds and reduce those crossing distances. And then pedestrian crosswalks, like I mentioned, a lot of mid-block crossings. A lot of those would be addressed within those priority corridor kind of corridors, but outside of those, you see here Pleasant Street east of Franklin Street. So this is providing access to the training green here. Pleasant Street is one way, it's pretty wide, a lot of speeding vehicles there. You have vehicles parked very close to the crosswalk. So this is an opportunity to kind of introduce some curb extensions, put in RFBs, and really improve the visibility of that crosswalk. Once again, using that pedestrian toolbox that we talked about earlier. And then upgrading and establishing school zones. So throughout the area, there are a number of schools. There's a lot of inconsistent and outdated signage out there. So really just, upgrading all of that to make these areas a lot safer. And then progressing those feasible one-way conversions, like I mentioned, taking that list of eligible or feasible roads, putting them through kind of this workflow to really move those projects forward. And like I mentioned earlier, John, if you move forward, maybe that's not always the right option, right? So as we kind of move forward with these projects, it's really important to communicate to the public, okay, we can go one way, but that's gonna, come with some trade-offs, and really just communicating that really well. So kind of some different options that you can have there. And then lastly is filling the gaps. So like I mentioned, there are a number of sidewalk gaps throughout the area, specifically Hedge Road and Robin Street to get to the Seaside Rail Trail, as well as some residential neighborhoods. So one that we kind of focus on here is Ocean View Avenue. There's lacking a sidewalk there now. It really limits accessibility and connectivity to a park right down the street. So a great option to introduce a sidewalk, and this is one of those scenarios too, a double whammy, where this street would be eligible for a one-way conversion. So if you do convert to one-way, you do have the opportunity to reallocate some of that space to a sidewalk. And then implementation. So how do these projects actually go from this report to construction? So we've kind of done, maybe the hard part in identifying some of the project needs and getting down to that nitty-gritty of those locations. But now we have to go through project scoping, where we really, conduct those preliminary studies, gather all of the necessary data to then move forward to design and construction, as well as permitting. And a big thing in here is funding. So now we have all of this data, we have all of these, locations. I did mention HSHIP funding in here. There are also opportunities within this for Complete Streets funding, Safe Streets and Spaces for All. There are a lot of different other mechanisms and a lot of data to now back that and go forward with a lot of those grants and applications. And then prioritizing projects, right? So we have a list of over 60 projects. How do we implement those over time? So really, we kind of created this weighting metric. We're looking at safety. So does it, improve a high crash cluster? We're looking at community hotspots, multimodal demand. So we're pulling some Mass DOT data that kind of measures potential demand for walking and biking. Equity. So we're, prioritizing projects that are located in low income and minority areas. Cost and time frame. Fills a gap. So if it fills a sidewalk gap. And then looking at the network role as well. And then if it has been identified within previous reports, it gets an additional score as well. So finally, we get to this, which is the final chart within the report. Kind of difficult to see here. I'm not going to go through all of these, obviously. But within the report, you have a project description. You kind of have the next step. So those kind of implementation steps, a lot of them will be scoping as their next step. We did provide a timeline. So scoping, what's that timeline look like? And then design and construction, what does that timeline look like? And then also a preliminary cost estimate that's right now broken down into high, medium, and low. We did receive some feedback to kind of put actual numbers to those, so the final report will include that. So kind of looking at the highest priorities here, we do see those, priority corridors coming up. And then the high priority, the next round, John, we see some of those intersection improvement coming up, some of those speed management requests coming up. And if you continue down, now we get, some school zones. We have a little bit more pedestrian crossings, some of those low-cost speed management measures coming in. And then finally, going down, once again, you'll start to see some of those one-way conversions start to pop up as well. So overall, 60 projects, they are prioritized here. That does not hold the town accountable for implementing them in that order whatsoever, but this is really just based on the data, the community input, everything that I've kind of gone through here. But the town may, wish to take out all of the low-cost, short-term projects and kind of, get all of that low-hanging fruit, or move forward with, that Route 3A, for example. So a lot of information I just presented. Thank you all so much for sitting through that. So if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, very thorough. Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. So I have a few questions. First, how long, obviously doing 60 projects or 60 or so projects is going to take a bit. So how long is this considered within the industry to be like valid and fresh data to rely on when making a project?
Definitely the crash data holds up. You have a very known safety issue that's going to continue to be a safety issue until you fix it. And
Okay.
then, you know, traffic volumes, those are going to go up and down depending on growth or whatnot. But I would say, you know, a lot of this is safety-based and public input-based. I'm sure James hears these, you know, concerns over and over again within these specific locations. So if they're an issue now, they're going to be an issue until they're fixed. So it is pretty, it'll go a long way.
So it doesn't have really a shelf life. We could rely on this. Obviously, we'd hope to get to some of this stuff sooner, but 10 years from now, if we were doing project number 64, we could still rely on this within the industry to justify that?
So we typically do crash data for 5 years.
Okay.
So that would be something that you would want to update. But,
Okay.
you know, typically if you have a crash trend that's been occurring, it's going to
Okay.
continue to occur.
And are there any other timeframes with any of the data involved, or is it 5 years or so, or?
Traffic volumes are typically 2 years for Mass DOT standards, but you'll see that we use very planning level estimates here, so that can be kind of taken either way, but yep.
Okay. I know the proponents of this project were sort of in the middle of the process concerned about sort of how long it was taking. I know it was mentioned at the beginning that it took longer than originally anticipated. I noticed earlier in the presentation, there was a draft report in April of 2024, and obviously here we are in March of 2025. So that slide didn't elucidate that, and there could be a very good reason between why it took 11 months to get from draft to here we are, but can you shed any light on what happened between April of 2024 and now, other than the outreach session that you met?
That outreach session, and then we also had a few other corridors come in that we actually ended up doing some more targeted safety assessments for as well, and that did, you know, kind of prolong that process, but hopefully you get the gist that was needed, but I'll hand it over to James.
Yep, just to add to that question, Mr. Canty. So part of the reason was on the town side. So we hired GPI to do the study, and they really needed direction from us as far as bringing it to completion. And to some extent, with staffing issues we had internally, it kind of slowed things down
Okay,
quite a bit.
sure. Okay, and James, this one's probably for you, so good that you came up. Obviously, there's this list of projects ranked with priority according to GPI. Do you feel, obviously also knowing we can't do 64 projects in 1 year, but do you feel that the report and the data that you have gives you sufficient information for you to make your own determinations, and for the DPW make their own determinations about which ones to do first, assuming money is not a reason for shifting that order around, but can you speak on that?
Sure. So from our perspective, we see this as a very valuable tool. So similar to our pavement management program, there's a lot of data that's collected, sorted through, and a lot of projects are identified. But like you said, we won't be able to get them all done within a short period of time. Now, what we will do is we will look at that list of 60 projects, and we will also, from our perspective, try to put them into different categories. Some of those projects are probably going to be very low cost and maybe very, and very close to being implemented. So I do believe with this tool, we will be able to pick some streets, and we do have a list of streets we've kind of come up with that we feel we would be able to move in the short term. And then more long term, we may require funding or additional outreach to the public to see what their support is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this study. This was excellent. This was a long time coming, and I appreciate it. So with that being said about the 60 projects, I was at the Precinct 3 caucus, and there was a couple of things that they were requesting that we could do probably right away and won't cost a lot of money to try and help with this situation. The speed, the 25-mile-an-hour speed. I mean, that's something I think we should look into implementing that right away. It makes so much sense in the congested areas.
Yep.
So, and, you know, this, like I said, this is really great watching this. South Street, a friend of mine lives at that intersection where Mayflower is. That's treacherous. I got my mirror taken off at that intersection, sitting to making a turn, a car come by and clip me. Summer Street, I drive it every day up and down. You know, unfortunately, there's no parking for some of those residents, and, you know, there's Amazon trucks double parked. You know, it's treacherous there. So that's a real dangerous area too. But again, James, if we could concentrate on coming up and taking care of the, as you say, the low-hanging fruit, and get, at least get some progress right away, stuff that's not gonna cost us really much money, except for signs.
Right.
Is that
Thank you, Charlie.
something?
So just to mention, the 25-mile-an-hour townwide thickly settled, that is something that we were going to be coming back to you shortly to
Okay.
present.
All right.
So that is something that is in the works. It was mentioned here, and we are looking to implement that. So within a short period of time, we will be back to present that to the board with how
Okay.
we would like to proceed with that. Other streets that I think are going to be able to move quick would be Birch Avenue, Fremont Street, Nelson Street, Oak Street, even though some of these might be a very quick fix and some will go for additional input from those residents.
Right.
Same thing with Standish Avenue, Westerly Road at Liberty, and then we are just about ready to make the improvements, or at least go out to bid, on the Court Street, Cherry Street traffic signal. So that also falls in this district, and we are close to putting that out.
And this is also a roadmap for if there's any projects that are gonna happen on any of those streets in the near future, you know, even if it's a couple of years down the road, at least you know that if you're gonna do it, you better include these changes. So we're not doing, unfortunately, it's happened that we've dug streets up a couple times within a short period. So this would be very helpful as like a roadmap for that. So anyway,
Yeah. No,
thank you for your work. So
Yep, you're
a lot of
welcome.
work.
And I agree. And I think even though the data and the information presented here will hold true, I think in time, we will revisit, I think, in 20 years from now, even though we would look at this report, we probably would need to, make sure nothing's really changed.
Yeah.
So I think we would need to update some of the information in the future, but this definitely gives us the tools we need to start looking at doing things today and setting up for the future.
And while I'm thanking Precinct 3 for being proactive months ago to get this study going, it was a great idea. It's going to be very helpful, so thank you.
Mr. Mahoney?
James, so we have, you and Mr. Coyle have a path forward off of this report, right? Okay, all right, that's great. Nicole, so when the chair said that you were very thorough, that was an understatement. So I just a couple of quick questions, and I don't know if you can you get back to the slide with the safety 20% and the different percentages? Not, And no, I think it was evaluating each of the, no. The prioritizing. You got it. So is this how the 60 plus got their score?
Correct. Yep.
So they were all evaluated through that slide right there.
Correct.
Okay.
And I do, within the report, there are, those evaluation criteria are broken down. So for safety, for example, we're looking at the number of crashes, occurring at that intersection or, on that segment. If they have a higher, occurrence of crashes, it gets a higher score within that 20%, if that makes sense. And then for community hotspot, looking at all of that, community data. So if it was in like a top percentage of those mentions, it got a higher score. If it wasn't mentioned at all, but it could have been a sidewalk gap, it doesn't get that high of a score. And then looking at, fills a network gap, is it gonna fill a sidewalk gap? If so, it gets a higher, score within that category. If it doesn't, it doesn't get much, if that makes sense.
Right. Nope. Makes complete sense. I just want to clarify that.
Yep,
Thank you very much.
of course.
I see the town meeting members from Precinct 3, where it all began. Would you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dale Weber for the record, Chairman of Precinct 3, where it did all begin. I wanted to say thank you to the board. Thank you to town meeting. Thank you to all the precincts that supported us. This was it was very much an overwhelming vote to spend the money on this project because so many people travel through precinct. So there was a great show of support. And I also wanted to thank Bill Coyle and James Downey. They inherited this. And I want to do a shout out to Jonathan Beater and Sheila Scazi, their predecessors, because they got the ball rolling and notified GPI based on their standing in the go-to bid list. And we couldn't be happier with the comprehensive package here that you guys have seen a summary of it. But if you get a chance, do they have this? If you get a chance, get the hard copy of this, and it's good reading. But anyway, excellent job all around. Nobody gets everything they're looking for, and we certainly didn't get everything we're looking for. We would have liked to have seen some different prioritizations, but as you can look at there's a lot of gray hairs in Precinct 3, and what we're saying is road design and safety procedures have certainly changed since something that we wanted to do in the past. You'd call up the chairman of the Board of Selectmen or the DPW director and say, hey, can you do this? And things would get done. This way here, everything, as Mr. Mahoney identified here with that slide, there was we wanted to take the politics out of things, and we wanted to have this done the way it's been done, and I think overall, we're very happy and we're pleased with the effort. And Nicole came into this. You've been very good. Carolyn Radish, I think she was great too. Great teams here all around. But thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the assistance, and especially thank you to the fellow town meeting members that supported.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment? Mr. Coyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Coyle, DPW Director. I just want to thank Nicole. Tremendous job on the presentation. I have to say, I worked at Mass Highway for 11 years, and a lot of what we would do is what Nicole was presenting tonight, and I worked with John probably 30 years ago. So very impressed, very thorough. I think there's enough work here to keep us busy for a long time. So James and I will work together to look at, as was mentioned, the low-hanging fruit. There's some projects here that we can implement quicker than others that probably won't be too costly, and also want to prioritize safety improvements where we having the pedestrian accidents, where we having motor vehicle accidents, bicycle accidents, and then try to prioritize those areas as well, along with speeding, and see what we can do, especially if there's more cost-effective measures to implement those sooner than later. So again, thank you, and thank you to Precinct 3 and Mr. Weber for putting this forward. It's a great study, very comprehensive, and again, a lot of work ahead of us, so thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a very thorough presentation. Did you want to speak? Sure, come on up.
Hello, Chairman Quintel and members of the board. My name is Tiffany Park, and I'm speaking also as a resident from Precinct 3, where it all began. I was hoping my gray hair didn't show up as much, but you probably can see it. I've been following this study. I live downtown. I think a lot of people can attest to the fact that, where you park and how you get to work and, how much people speed down your street is such a personal issue to people. So I'm glad that, Precinct 3 initiated this and how involved people have been. So I've been following it. I participated in the survey, also attended the open house that you folks had back in April of 2024. Really pleased with the thoroughness of the study. Obviously, I appreciated very much the way that GPI looked at the importance of network flexibility with respect to how the different downtown streets work with each other. Very much liked the suggestions that were made to the intersection over near Market Street, Summer Street, Sandwich Street. There was a slide that showed the options that were presented there. So really aside from my comments, just saying how much I appreciated the work that went into this, I do have a question, and I don't know if it's one more for Nicole from GPI or if it's from DPW, but the layout that was presented for that intersection over near Market Street was part of the April 2024 open house, and a lot of people had an opportunity to look at it and comment on it. I think that the tweaks that they've proposed would work really well. It's just enough so that it will make pedestrian safety much better. It will slow traffic. The traffic calming measures are good, and I don't think that the measures are that far of a reach as far as expense and the extent of the work that has to be done. However, in the interim, I did recently attend a presentation about the Downtown Resiliency Project, which of course I think is a great project. But as part of that project, a very different plan for the Market Street, Summer Street, Pleasant Street area was presented. And that, I have a good amount of concerns about that version of the plan that was presented and how that might impact the intersection and traffic flow around the area, and also whether that alternate plan will in fact make the intersection safer and calm traffic. So I guess my question, sorry, long-winded, is the concept that was presented last year that people commented on that was presented tonight, is that what we're looking to do? Or is the alternative that was presented as part of the downtown resiliency, is that what we're looking to do? Or is there going to be a conversation in between? So that would be through you, Chairman Quintel, if I could just ask that question for clarification.
I guess long story short is that intersection is still being under evaluation. So, I mean, we do have one alternative here. The other study is providing another option, but we haven't decided what would be most appropriate. So that is something that we will continue to work with Mike Cahill and that group to make sure we're all get to the same page.
Will you have public sessions so people can weigh in before you actually do any construction? Will there be any weigh-in, James?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, all right. Come on up.
My name, is this loud enough? My name is Yada Momini. I'm a member of the Plymouth Center Steering Committee and also live on 21 Nelson Street. I agree with the recommendations of the study, and the primary 4 points I have are, first, why do we need a proposal for the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit when it seems pretty much a no-brainer? And I didn't know politically why we can't just proceed to vote on that and then work the implementation side. But that's rhetorical, I'll let that be. In terms of the study, I represent a few people in the town that weren't able to come here, but we all support the idea of chicanes on Nelson Street, which is the number 6 priority in red. And I also representing 4 people, Joan Frobig on 4 Shaw Court, Harrison and Rachel Quinn at 1 Shaw Court, which abut Nelson Street. We would really strongly recommend that the town not study Nelson Street as is proposed in the study, but instead put piloted chicanes in there in the form of the sandbags or construction barriers. And that way it's a low-cost, no-brainer. Let's pilot it and let's not study it anymore, because it's been April since we got that recommendation. And our neighbors don't want somebody to die before somebody does something about it. So I think that low-cost pilot, you use some other term that I have notes on. And then that was the second thing. The third thing is, although I believe that personally, by the way, I was representing myself when I'm speaking, not the Plymouth Center Steering Committee. I just want to clarify. The third thing is that although personally, I'd love Nelson to be one of the top projects, the key thing for me is that I think that we need to proceed and start looking at the community good, and let's not look at individual perspectives like mine for Nelson Street, but rather let's get that stuff that the DPW thinks they can do quickly done, and then let's start getting the grants and the money necessary to do the key safety things that need to be done. So I'm a little impatient after submitting a request to the town in 2016 in writing to have Nelson Street be 25 miles an hour. So I think that's it. And I just commend the analytics and just think we need to start looking at implementation, cost benefit, funding, and the rest, so we can just proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jade, I believe we have somebody online.
Hello?
Hey. Can you hear us?
Hi, this is Harrison Quinn. My neighbor Yara just spoke on my behalf. I was able to get on Zoom. So thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to hear all our pleas. And I am incredibly grateful for GPI and the work that town meeting has voted on, the work that GPI has done, and everything that is being recommended in this. I 100% wholeheartedly support it as a member of town meeting, as a member of the Plymouth Center Steering Committee, and just as a resident of the corner of Shaw Court and Nelson Street, excuse me. Whatever I can do to help assist, I'm willing to do it, because something needs to be done. Nothing is not a solution. As someone whose backyard looks at the rail path, every day that I look out there, I see someone hitting their brakes before they hit someone crossing that crosswalk, and I worry so much about what's going to happen. 2 things I want to bring up. One, I'll speak on behalf of a community that I don't think gets a lot of representation, and that's my 13-year-old students. They absolutely 100% love biking downtown. And I know there's been a lot of complaints about that, and I understand that, but they still bike downtown a lot. And the more we can do to make downtown safer for them, I think is a positive. And something I've heard from my neighbors in the area is worry about Lothrop Street, that we put traffic calming measures on Nelson Street, whatever it may be. I'm in support of anything. They worry that people just bypass Nelson and go on Lothrop Street to kind of just get around all the traffic calming measures. So I hope that we implement Nelson Street, we also implement Lothrop Street, so people don't just turn Lothrop into what Nelson is today, which is people speeding, not paying attention, going down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak, Jade, online? No? Okay, seeing that, I'll say thank you again. I heard the comments on Nelson Street. I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but a lot of boat trailers go down Nelson Street too, so we have to keep that in mind as we're putting, long as that's good. And as far as the schools go, we're underway right now, which I think you all know, that we may be having a new location if everything goes well. So we want it to be safe, but I would concentrate on, but I don't want to tell you jobs, you people all have degrees, but just checking the boxes. That's going on right now in town. And the one thing I didn't see in your report is the couches on the sidewalk. That's everywhere. And it's really dangerous.
Absolutely.
When people, I've seen kids, they're putting them now so you can't even walk on the sidewalk. I think sooner or later we're going to have to address that one. But that was just a little.
You know what? I didn't see any couches on my drive around, but I used to go to college, so I
Not just the
understand.
season, but they're there, believe me. And much more. That's just, I was being
Yeah,
nice with that, so.
definitely.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Oh, go ahead.
No, we have one gentleman in the audience wants to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Mike Babini. I'm a precinct representative in Precinct 3. Thank you for the great presentation. We're very proud of the document that came out. One of the things I wanted to mention that we didn't mention a lot during the discussion was enforcement. Right now, on Route 3A through Plymouth, through Sandwich Street, the speed limit is 30 miles an hour. It's a thickly settled district. Cars drive by there. I live on Sandwich Street. Cars drive by there doing 50, 55, 60 miles an hour often. I walk downtown a lot, and I walk down the same roads every day, and the same cars are parked on the sidewalk every day. So my feeling is, although this is all great stuff, unless we have enforcement, it really isn't going to help much at all. And I know our police department is stressed out as far as all the work they have to do. But I do think that some attention, more attention, has to be made to the downtown North Plymouth district regarding the speeding and parking on sidewalks. That doesn't seem to be being solved at this point. So I just offer that as observation, but I think enforcement should be one of the top issues we deal with as far as safety is concerned. And enforcement means controlling speed and getting people off the sidewalk, and I'm sorry, cars off the sidewalk. And so I just want to convey that feeling I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Melissa Mattinzi, resident of Clifton Street. I love the plan, 99% of it. As a resident of Clifton Street, I know I've talked with a couple of you about the parking issues that we have over there. Mainly because, rough count off the top of my head, there are 7 to 8 multifamily houses over there that are at least 3 apartments. So you're talking probably 6 to 8 to 12 cars per some of these houses. There's not enough off-street parking for those individual places for the residents to park. So we depend on the parking on our street. One of the houses doesn't even have a driveway, and so they park over on Seaver Street and lug all their stuff around. I'm not averse to seeing it go one way. I've lived downtown for my entire life. I know the issues have come up, especially with the growth. I would just like to advocate that we at least keep the parking as it is for a one-way and not try to do the alternate parking. It would create a lot of work for us to get used to it, but also in the sense that there's no alternative parking for us. My car doesn't fit in the driveway that we rent from because it was built at the 1800s. So you can get like a little Honda Fit in there, and that's about as big as you're gonna get. And then trying to park in other places, if you're trying to unload for grocery shopping or with the kids or anything, it's a burden to have to truck everything around or to drive around the street 4 or 5 times to get in. And then we also have a lot of businesses who their employees, and you may not have gone there during those times, so a lot of the employees park on our street. a lot of the customers park on our street. So there's always a competition. I wouldn't even be adverse to having a resident-only location for that also, just to try to help the residents who live there, because we get the parking from Memorial Hall for the events, we get the parking for the parades, and we appreciate that. We go to all that. We love having the activity in that space. It's just, if you could consider just the basic needs of the residents. And I know that you hear from the landlords, but they don't live there. And they don't experience the day-to-day of trying to get in and out of your place and get stuff in and out of your car to your apartment. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate there, you know, there are some,
One more, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Bill Cohen, Precinct 3. The report really nails it. The comments are dead on. The only thing I'd ask, as you move forward in the planning process, everyone that's engaged in it, that we should take this opportunity to look at materials, surface area materials that are sensitive to the historical character of the 400-year-old village where it all began. So we want to see if there's a chance we can introduce brick or granite or some of these materials in your incorporation so we don't lose those characteristics. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you,
all
Nicole.
so much for your time. Thank you.
Yep. Outdoor dining, Mr. Brindisi.
Good evening, Derek Brindisi, Town Manager. So tonight is the annual presentation and discussion on the outdoor dining program. I was able to work over the last few weeks with Mr. Bill Coyle, our DPW Director, and our Chief of Police, Dana Flynn, to do a cost analysis on how much it costs town staff to set up these parklets, to break down these parklets, to set up the water-filled barriers, and then the police details. We were able to be a little bit more efficient this year by attempting to set up 2 parklets per day. So that was able to reduce the cost in this analysis. In this analysis, we do not include flowers. I know in the past, the board has included the acquisition of flowers for the parklets. We do not include that in today's analysis. That being said, we are projecting that we'll have 6 to 7 applications this year from various restaurants. The renewal recommendation would be for $2,400 for, again, a renewal. For a new parklet, so a new parklet would be a little bit more. The cost would be approximately $4,175. The reason being is because a new parklet that has not been constructed yet, one needs to be designed, it needs to be constructed, we need to buy materials, and then that parklet has to be scribed to that specific location. So in the past, those parklets that are being renewed, we use the same parklet as we did the year before because it's specifically scribed to that curb in front of that restaurant. We are also proposing that the outdoor dining season take place from May 19th to October 13th. So again, to recap, we're projecting 6 to 7 parklets at a cost of renewal of $2,400 and a new one at $4,175.
Thank you. Mr. Canty?
Derek, can you go over those costs again, just because the little sheet that we have has some different numbers on it?
So the setup and breakdown for each parklet, so that setup and breakdown is handled by a craftsman at a cost of approximately $1,738.
Yeah, that's what we got, 22.
Right. But didn't you say for an existing parklet it was 2,400 something?
Right, and then additionally, for the we need the highway division. They're the ones that handle the water fill barriers and signage.
Yep.
That's an additional $643 per parklet.
So to me, the 1738 plus 646 would be 234.84, but I thought you had said 24.
Right, so 643 and, what did I say, 17, I'm just trying to do
And
this.
1738
22.
would be
Right.
2384,
I have
not counting the change.
I have 2381. 1738 plus 643 is 2381. So I rounded it up to 2400.
Okay. And then the cost you have for,
And that includes details for both of those two jobs.
okay, and the cost for a new parklet is 3,532
Plus the 643.
plus
yes.
643, so that'd be 4,178 plus change.
4,000, I rounded it to $4,175.
Okay. Okay. Have we received much interest yet? I know that last year, fewer people participated than the year prior. Are we expecting it to stay static with last year, go up, go down, or we don't know?
So Mr. Veo is here. Mr. Veo is the president of the Downtown Waterfront Business District, and our communications, he has suggested that his interest of approximately 6 to 7 parklets, but he's here, so he can speak to those requests.
Thank you.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Derek, how do you arrive at the $643 number? Because in the prior categories, it looks like you've added things up. But if you add up all of the total per parklet under highway division, it's somewhere in the 5,300 range, I think.
Right.
So the spreadsheet that I was sent breaks down, we have 2 foremen, we have a lead man, a construction lead man, has the hourly rate, has a motor equipment operator, 2 maintenance workers, and a police detail, for a total per parklet of $643.
But
And that is using, again, that's using an estimate of 9 parklets.
But I don't understand where you're saying it's $643 per parklet, right?
That's correct. So the total would be $5,792. And if we divide that number by 9 parklets, so that we were projecting up to 9 parklets, that's $643 per parklet.
Okay.
So we'd add that $643 per parklet to the setup, which is done by our facilities maintenance division, at a total per parklet, $1,738. And as I mentioned earlier, I rounded that to 2,400.
If we have fewer, we've got a smaller number of businesses interested in parklets, shouldn't that number increase then? Somewhere around the 800 range?
Right, so again, it's difficult, it's difficult because we don't know how many applications we'll get, but if we use a conservative number of 7 parklets, right, that number would certainly increase.
Be 827.
That's right, yes. So if I did 7.
Why in the facilities maintenance division are we taking the total and not dividing it by the number of parklets?
That was just the, do you want to answer that, Bill? Go ahead.
Thank you, Derek. The numbers are larger here, thank you. Sure, I know it's a little bit confusing because a couple of different things. One is the facilities estimate is based on per parklet. We know how many hours it's going to take them, 4 hours for each parklet. The information that we have for the setup for the highway division, when we looked at I think 2 years ago, we had 9 parklets, and we based on how many hours, it was basically 2 days for setup. So we calculated the cost per parklet. So how many hours for each one of the parklets? So realistically, the cost per parklet should be fairly consistent, so that instead of being 2 days, it may go down to a day and a half, but the cost, the average cost per parklet shouldn't change for 7. And something I want to point out as well, that when we looked at this, we looked at the overtime rate for the highway division. They're going to be doing these during the day, but we recognize the fact that it's taking work away that they would normally be doing during the day, and they quite often work on weekends. So to offset this work, there would be work on the weekends, and that's why it's charged at a time and a half rate, if you noticed, just to kind of offset that work that they would normally be doing. But because of the traffic, they can't do these on Saturdays and Sundays. Not sure if I clarified anything or made it more confusing.
I don't know either. I'll defer.
I have a question. So what if only one person applies? I mean, because the numbers are based on if 9 or 7. If only one applies, what's the cost? And say it's, whether it's a new or an existing parklet, what's the actual cost there? Do we know that? Is that worth us doing?
How many, one? Or
Yeah.
two? Well, we're committed to doing this, so if we have 2 people, 2 businesses apply, then we know that obviously it's not gonna take us a full day for the highway division, so we would mobilize, if it takes us a half a day to set up the 2, fill them with water, that would be a half a day for the highway division, but it may be a full day, because it's 4 hours per parklet for facilities. So they would have 1 full day, and the highway division would have a half a day. So it's certainly, it's gonna be relative to how many parklets we have.
Well, right, but I guess, is the ask that we vote on the rate? Because if the rate is dependent on participation, then that's tough to do.
But this, when we come up with a proposed fee for any one of our licenses or permits, it's based upon what we project man hours. So, for example, like to do a food inspection through our public health division, our permit fee is based upon how long it would take to do that. So in this situation, we're just projecting based upon what we think is going to happen, and that's our proposed fee. It could be higher, so we may have 13 applications, which then we would have to mobilize, the proposed new fee of $4,175.
But didn't last year, was it like 4 participated?
I believe 6 participated last year.
Was it?
I believe it was 6. Yes. So are we ever going to cover our costs 100%? Well, again, we're projecting, and we can't pivot once we set these fees.
So are you looking for us to set like a fee that's could be prorated up or down dependent on participation, or you want to?
It would be easier if it was a flat fee for all participants.
So this would be the fee if 9 people apply, or if
1 person applies.
Or 15 people.
That's right.
Okay.
Mr. Blitzer?
Mr. Chairman, I've been to the meetings in the downtown waterfront, the business meetings, and this is very important to the businesses that have attended. They've expressed their need for this. And I don't know if it'd be helpful to ask Rick as the president of that association, and I see 3 restaurateurs out here that we may want to, if it's okay, you can hear from them. What's up? Well, then after David's questions, but I think it'd be, before you make a decision, let's listen to these folks. But go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Blitzer. I'm just letting the board do just like we did the last one, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Derek, in past years, has construction of the parklets been subsidized versus right now what we're proposing is we're passing the cost straight on to the businesses, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, in the past, back that up a little. Yeah, so 2 years ago, the town subsidized this operation by approximately $20,000 using ARPA funds. Last year, what the board passed was a fee for $2,900 for a new parklet, which what we're proposing today is $4,175, and a renewal was $1,000 last year, which again, this year we're proposing $2,400. And last year, the presentation was very similar to this year's. There's a slight variation, given the fact that, you know, some of the overtime rates have changed slightly. But last year, we had, and I say we, Brad Brothers was the assistant town manager at the time, had done a presentation, and we were recommending approximately $2,500 last year for a renewal, and the board took the position that a renewal would be $1,000. So we did subsidize it, yes.
Given that businesses were beneficiaries of that past subsidy, wouldn't it make better sense just to have a flat rate for any parklet, regardless of whether it's newly built or already existing?
Well, I'm not sure where you're going with that. If you had a flat rate, then someone would be penalized. So, you know, the existing user who's been using these parklets for the past number of years, 5 years, may have to pay more because we're trying to strike that balance of a new and an old. Or, you know, someone who wanted a new one based upon the fee would, in theory, may pay less because they would be paying less than the material cost and the cost to set it up.
But they wouldn't be penalized because in prior years, they received a subsidy from the town.
Yeah, so a renewal, if you're suggesting that a renewal license fee is more than the recommendation of $2,400, you know, then I would say, yeah, that they've been subsidized over the last 5 years, and so it would be fair to pay something north of $2,400.
Any other questions or comments from the board? If not, we'll open it up to the audience. Sir?
Rick Veo, 28 Warren Ave. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of the DWD, Downtown Waterfront District, on what, from my perspective, seemingly should be a all-supportive type of discussion about outdoor dining. It's not necessarily, because I understand that, you know, there's been controversy over costs and flowers and who's watering and who's responsible, and the idea of providing subsidies to private businesses. And I understand all that. The long and short of this is outdoor dining has been a phenomenal boom for downtown Plymouth. It started in COVID, and it was absolutely needed. There's no question about that. And I think the selectmen and the town manager and everyone involved did the right thing, and we brought it together. What we saw during that time was the entire South Shore, and even as far as Boston, recognizing what a phenomenal thing outdoor dining was, and specifically was in Plymouth. I mean, we had write-ups in the Boston Globe, we had it in local newspapers, we had it on the news. It was just a phenomenal draw, and it's continued. Now, we've seen some businesses go away. I think we started with a high of about 14 businesses, maybe, something like that. And we've seen that dwindle down to about 7, and I think that will be about the applications this year. There's a number of reasons. You've had businesses that just can't get the staff. They can't support any more seats, and there's nothing they can do about it. They've had businesses that have left town or gone out of business. You've had businesses that are very new and maybe can't afford or don't have the internal management structure to do that. You've also seen some businesses like, say, San Diego's that have transitioned from one type of business to another and maybe don't need or want that type of outdoor dining. But the long and short of it is this isn't a benefit just to those 7 companies or 7 businesses that utilize this. This is a benefit to the entire downtown. And I say that from being the president of the Downtown Waterfront Group. I say that from being a local retail business owner that has no benefit seemingly from outdoor dining, but we do, because we see people waiting for a table outside or sitting outside, noticing a shop, wanting to go in. And I say that from places like, whether it's the Captain John boats or our historical sites or our cultural centers, it is bringing more people to downtown Plymouth. Ultimately, with the study we just heard and other projects that are in the works, I think the downtown and the waterfront will eventually get revamped and probably be more supportive of outdoor dining on a permanent basis. Maybe it's removable bollards, maybe variances in the sidewalks, et cetera, that allows outdoor dining to not be this prohibitive cost to the town and to the business owners, that if someone wants it, it should be easy to establish. We drop in some removable bollards, we're good to go, and everyone's thrilled. But I can't stress enough what a benefit this is, not just to those businesses, but to the entire downtown. I don't have any qualms with any of the costs. The DPW and specifically Frank Gomes and team have done what I would term as an absolutely phenomenal job in setting these up. The first year I was involved in it, I personally orchestrated the construction of all the barriers and whatnot. We got a lot of donations, we got company sponsorships to make that happen, so it wasn't just subsidized by the town. There was a lot of people, there were some grants, there were business owners that just helped out. Frank and team did just far, far beyond what anyone could have expected in setting those up, and now they've carried on with it. And there was some question along the way of, why don't the business owners just set these up? They can't. They can't do what Frank and team are doing, and nor do I think we want local restaurateurs running around on the 3A trying to set up things and look cohesive and whatnot. As far as the costs go, again, I don't have a qualms with what it actually costs to do this. What I would respectfully ask is that instead of 2,400, and I think you said 4,100 for a new, that each of those figures be reduced by $1,000 and subsidized by the town. I think $1,400 for an existing parklet, or $3,100, if that was the 41 was the figure, to do a new parklet is palatable for the downtown businesses, and I think the approximately $6,000 or $7,000 investment by the town is coming back 100-fold in the draw to the town, the potential tax revenue from the town, the parking revenue for the town, by all the people who are drawn here by outdoor dining. And I just cannot stress that enough, that it's much needed. I think outdoor dining in this iteration is a stopgap until the downtown and the waterfront gets to a point where it can handle it on its own without any, ongoing investment from the town. And maybe it's just a license fee from the restaurateur if they want it. But I think we need to maintain this. It's been very successful, and it would be, with everything with the town's trying to do, with everything the downtown waterfront district is trying to do, I think this is a major step back to pull it away, because I think those 7 applicants will either go to nothing or maybe 1 or 2 if those full fees are in place. So I can certainly answer any questions from my perspective.
Oh. Anyone else wishing to speak? In the audience? Please come up. Jade, is there anybody online yet? No? Okay, thank you.
Evan Malaguti, Precinct 2, and member of the Advisory and Finance Committee, as well as the Vice Chairman of the Visitor Services Board. While I appreciate over the past few years the Select Board has been accepting of outdoor dining to help the struggling restaurant businesses during an unprecedented event, and also to help with the recovery after that, I do see that if this is going forward, that these rates are justified. I would think maybe a little bit higher, but that's based upon the numbers that the town manager and DPW staff has actually looked at. I don't think if we are looking at projects that are coming down the pipeline for the waterfront downtown, it's going to entice more businesses to actually apply for these, because if that was the case, we would have seen that in the past 1 to 2 years after most of the pandemic recovery has happened. I also am in the restaurant industry as an employee, not in the downtown, but I understand the levels with staffing needs and the expectations that arise. But I'm also a resident and a taxpayer as well too, so it's sort of the entire flip side. We had, with this budget that is going before town meeting, had to put vacancy fillers for positions because we didn't have the funds available to fill positions based upon the current budgeting until a later proposal comes down or costs change during the actual next fiscal year. I don't think the town has the ability to finance any private businesses for that when the aforementioned that I just stated was put into the budget that you all supported earlier this year. Also, to the aspect of the flowers, that has been a very large sticking point for the Visitor Services Board. Last year, we made a guarantee for the flowers based upon the opportunity that the restaurants would maintain them. If they weren't satisfactorily maintained, the Visitor Services Board made a strong statement that we would not fund going forward. And based upon the result of last year, we found that it was unsatisfactorily met for the expectations we provided. Plus, we also don't have any funding left in our budgets based upon what we've been looking at and we've been processing through the grant applications this year. So those are my concerns and my recommendations that the rates should stay the same as presented by the town manager, if and so the select board decides to continue with the outdoor dining. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'm Katie Thayer, owner of Uva Wine Bar in downtown. The restaurants that we're talking about are all small restaurants. A $2,400 bill at this point for us is a really big pill to swallow. You know, you look at some of the other restaurants in town that are bigger, they're all down at the waterfront. We're competing for those tourists to come up to the downtown area. They're all at the waterfront. And we're smaller businesses, so we obviously don't have the income and the margins that some of the bigger restaurants do have. So I second what Rick Veo said. He kind of hit the nail on the head, but also know that the profit margins for the restaurants right now are not very high. So at $2,400, we probably will get maybe 1 or 2 applications. And where's that going to take Plymouth? Where's that going to take the whole concept of outdoor dining and increasing our tourism dollars and that sort of thing? So just something to keep in mind.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Mr. Veo?
So I should have mentioned this in the first go-around, but so the flowers we were trying to take off the board, we're going to try to handle that on our own, and I'm hoping to work with the town on the watering piece of it as they watering the hanging flowers and work with the restaurant owners and/or the downtown waterfront district. We end up with some staff of taking care of sort of the deadheading, if you will, of the flowers. But the flowers, generally speaking, wouldn't be something from a funding standpoint that the town would have to get involved in.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just want to remind the board that each one of these parklets holds approximately 29 seats. So, you know, in my estimation, if they turn these tables over 3 times, they should be able to gross enough revenue to cover the costs for these parklets. Not to confuse matters more, but last year the board did vote a $100 fee for those restaurants that did not choose to use the parklets, but chose to put tables on the sidewalk. So that's something we may want to take up after the first vote.
Wish of the board?
just,
Oh, you want another comment? Go ahead, Charlie.
well, I'm going to make a comment before we vote. I can save it for discussion. Mr. Canty, if you'd like me to do that. Somebody wanted to make a motion and second it, then I'll make my comments and may make an amendment.
Hold up, please. Just one more. Come on up.
Friends, we meet again. My name is Erin Murphy from Sukasa. A couple things. One, I do think that outdoor dining is essential to all of downtown as a whole. I mean, it is a draw. You know, I think that everyone benefits from that, not just, I mean, it's definitely essential to my restaurant, but I do think it's a draw. Secondly, as far as the cost goes, I agree with Rick and Katie, the 1,400, that sort of thing. 2,400 is a lot to swallow. I would like to see a detailed kind of breakdown of those costs, if possible. My third concern is I don't know where the 29 seats came from. That's a big parklet. But, well, yeah, I don't know if you're doing costs by seat numbers or that sort of thing, but I just wanted to reiterate that it is crucial for, I think, kind of seasonal to have the outdoor dining. And yeah, I appreciate your time and consideration on this. That's it.
Mr. Yeah, go ahead. Then we'll go to Mr. Canty.
So the 29 seats, that is a correct figure, but it's the maximum number that any restaurant can have, or they would have to add bathrooms, bathroom capacity. Most parklets, a single parklet, probably houses 12 seats. You know, it might be 15, but it's somewhere in that range. So it is a little less, but the 29 is accurate in terms of if you had a large enough parklet, you could have up to that.
Mr. Canty.
So last year, when we subsidized it, we said we were only going to subsidize it then. That was the last time, rather, and then we were going to, if the businesses wanted to continue that program, then they would, because if they're adding seats to the restaurant, one would think they're adding revenue to the restaurant, and that could cover the cost of adding those seats. I would be potentially amenable to lowering the cost of a renewal since they're already in the so-called Parklet Club. But for new applicants, I think we have to cut it off at some point. We can't keep subsidizing private businesses in the downtown area in perpetuity. So if you've already participated in the program and you're already helping, if we're saying that it's helping our downtown, you doing so, then I'm happy to make it a little easier for you to stay in the club. But if you're a new applicant, you'd have the incentive of next year potentially having a lower cost. But this year, you'd have to pay the freight. So I think the rounded up numbers were, I think, 2,400 for new and 4,200 for, I'm sorry, 2,400 for existing and 4,200 for new. So I'd be amenable to potentially lowering the 2,400 to 1,400, and keeping the 4,200 at 4,200. But I'm open to suggestions from my colleagues before a motion is made.
Thank you, Mr. Canty, because that's exactly what I was going to motion, that we cut it down. And I just want to say why. I just want to talk about the restaurant business. Last year, I voted to knock it down to $1,000 because I know the hardships that the restaurants face. The costs of not getting better. As one of the restaurateurs brought up, that The profit margin is way down. The food costs are extraordinary. The labor costs are extraordinary. Believe me, I'm not going to say I'm involved, but I know most of the restaurants in town. And whether it's the big players or the little players, everybody, it's been an awful winter, but everybody is struggling. With that being said, we are a tourist town. We depend on these businesses in our downtown and the waterfront to support our tourism. Without them, the tourists, they're going to be bored, they're going to go somewhere else. So to me, we should do everything that we can possibly to help them. If I thought that everybody's making a lot more money this year as opposed to last year, I would say, you know what, they got to start paying their way. And we did talk about that last year. But I think it's even worse this year. And guess what? And I'm not making a political statement. I'm not sure it's going to get any better. So I'm worried about some things that are going on nationally. And so I like, if you want to make that motion, I'll second that motion, Kevin, if we're ready to do that. But
Please.
so anyway, I support the restaurants, whatever we can do for them. Thank you.
Okay, if I may, before we start making motions. I think it was I that said last year, you're absolutely right, that it would be my last year going forward with this, and I've been saying it now for several years. I'm not against the outdoor dining, but I believe if you want the extra seats, you need to pay for them. Things are just as hard for every other restaurant and taxpayer in this town. If it's that much of a good deal and it's really great for business, then you shouldn't have a problem with the fee, in my eyes. And if it doesn't pay, then you know what? It's a bad investment. And Mr. Veo, to your comments earlier, you got a large sum of money from the foundation. Maybe the foundation would be willing to help these people get their parklets, or the chamber, or the One Fund. But I think to use taxpayers' money in budgets as tight as they are is just, I just don't get it. This started in 2000. The governor allowed it during COVID, when people couldn't all be in small areas, and it got to outside, and then it was, as Mr. Malaguti referenced, it was the flowers, then it was this, and it was that. I mean, I'm in business too. If I can't afford it, I don't do it, or I'm not going to be there long. And it's not because I don't feel for any of the businesses. If it was such a great thing, this room would be full with people. There must be 25 restaurants on that strip. Why aren't, whatever there are, why aren't the rest of them here? If it's such a, because it's not. It's not even used a lot. I'm going to be honest, I got the floor. I go downtown a lot, and I see them empty and not even open on a Saturday nights, Friday nights. I don't know whose I'm looking at, but if I need to start taking pictures, believe me, I will. So I'm just going to say what my piece is. You all got to say what yours was. Every year, it's another year. I'm done with it. COVID's over, and I'm out unless you want to do it. You have to pay for it with my vote. That's it. Thank you. Do you have a motion, Mr. Canty?
Yes. So I will make a motion to approve the outdoor dining at a rate of, at the seasonal dates that were presented in terms of operation, at a rate of $1,400 for a prior participant to renew, and $4,200 for a new applicant to apply and enter the program. That would be a $1,000 reduction for a pre-existing, pre-participating business, and no reduction for a new applicant.
Motion by Mr. Canty.
I want to second that motion.
Second by Mr. Blitzer. Discussion? Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with your sentiments from earlier. There are restaurants in Cedarville and Manamet and West Plymouth that don't benefit from this program. I think that if the businesses are benefiting from a provision that this board is putting forward, they ought to pay their fair share for it. I am a supporter of outdoor dining. I have been in those parklets from time to time myself, and I'd like to see the opportunity continue. But I cannot support the reduced amount for returning businesses. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Golden?
No.
Mr. Blutzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
No.
And I'll abstain because I'm in that business. Motion doesn't carry.
I'll make a motion to approve the parklets at the rate presented, being $2,400 for a existing applicant and $4,200 for a new applicant, and still within the seasonal operation dates presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blutzer?
No.
And I abstain, as I don't know who the applicants you may have, so I'm just going to abstain. So the motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could I had mentioned last year there was an additional fee for those restaurants that chose not to use the parklet program. And there was a fee imposed for each table that was set up on the sidewalk for table service. So this wouldn't include takeout service, but table service at $100 per table.
And we can do that on the sidewalks with no...
Right, so if there was a restaurant who wanted to, say, put 3 tables out there, they still would have to file for an alteration of premises through our licensing agent, but it would be $100 per table.
Mr. Canty?
Regardless of size of table, like if it's a 2-person table or a 4, I don't imagine you could have more than 4 at a sidewalk safely, but...
Yeah, so last year we were assuming 4 seats per table.
Okay.
Derek, if you could just touch on that and speak close to the microphone. I don't think they heard you in the back, please.
Yeah, so last year there was a second fee that was imposed. It was for those restaurants that chose not to use the parklet program. They would have to conform with an alteration of premises if they were to serve, say, alcohol, but that there'd be a second fee imposed of $100 per table. They'd have to go through the typical licensing and inspection process to make sure that it's ADA compliant, that it's cordoned off if they're serving alcohol. But this would be per table at $100, assuming 4 seats per table.
How many tables would you say, Derek? They could have 3 or 4?
It would
depends.
It would be dependent on the frontage of that restaurant. So again, one thing we have to be very mindful of is ADA access. So we don't want tables and chairs blocking the walking path. So we'd have to use our inspection services team to do that analysis to make sure tables are situated in a certain location along that storefront.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Canty?
Make a motion to approve the proposed rate for non-parklet sidewalk tables pursuant to the regulations of the Inspectional Services Department and any other relevant regulations as needed at $100 per table.
Second. Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Mahoney. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blutzer?
Yes.
4 yes, and I abstain. So that passes. They can put tables if they meet the requirements. Town manager's report?
Oh, you gotta execute the warrant.
Oh, sorry, skipped right over it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we execute the 2025 Spring Special Town Meeting warrant.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
And myself, yes, unanimous. Anyone wishing to speak under public comment? Please come up. Jade, is there anybody online? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Rich Cirque, town meeting member from Precinct 2. This afternoon, I was made aware of the fact that an order of taking by eminent domain had been recorded last Friday for 5 of the 6 parcels that are associated with the former Full Sail restaurant. And I have some questions about that. The purchase and sale agreement for 6 parcels, which was executed in April of 2024, was for $655,000, contingent upon approval by town meeting of funding in that amount. And of course, the purchase and sale agreement required that the title be clear. I assume the title was researched prior to town meeting. If not, I don't know why it wasn't done then. In any event, when I see a taking by eminent domain of property that was under agreement to be purchased by the town, the immediate thought comes into my mind that maybe there was something wrong with the title that required the town to exercise the power of eminent domain to acquire the land. And I'm here to ask whether there was in fact...
And we are not going to answer these questions, so if that's where you're going, this is over.
Well, I'm just raising them as a public...
Well, you more than well can, but I'm just telling you up front, you know better, you're a lawyer, and it could be litigation. We don't talk about it in public.
Okay, I'm just raising...
Okay, so you can make your assumptions and ask your questions. You have 1 minute.
The order of taking was for 5 of the 6 parcels. And I'm curious as to why the order of taking was for only 5 and not all of the 6 parcels. So my point is that the order of taking raised questions in my mind as to why the seller wasn't merely compelled to sell the land if he got cold feet because he was under agreement to sell it. And if in fact there was a title problem, why wasn't the title searched before town meeting voted rather than searched afterwards and only to discover later that an eminent domain taking would be required in order to acquire the land? So I'm raising these as questions. I don't necessarily expect to have answers tonight.
Anyone else wishing to speak under public comment? Do we have anyone online? Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Meg Sheehan from Community Land and Water Coalition, and personally I am a taxpayer and have been for my entire life in the town of Plymouth. This is to respond to statements by Plymouth Town Manager Derek Brindisi about me during his town manager's report at the February 25th, 2025 Select Board meeting. The topic concerned the land development project at 71 Hedges Pond Road. In his report, Mr. Brindisi falsely accused me of lying to the public. I request that Mr. Brindisi withdraw his defamatory statement and immediately cease and desist further disparagement of me. I won't repeat what he said about me, but it is in the recording. He was responding to comments I made during the meeting's public comment period. Each fact that I stated is accurate and easily corroborated by public records. He was referring specifically to my statement that the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Historic Preservation Officer provided information to the town that an archaeological study is required for the 71 Hedges Pond Road Sand Mining and Development Project. A member of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe read this to the board at its February 18, 2025 meeting, which is recorded, and a written copy was sent to the building inspector, which can easily be established. Therefore, an archaeological study has been requested by an officer of a federally recognized tribal nation. Mr. Brindisi has used his position of power as the town manager to defame a member of the public during a televised and recorded meeting. All speakers deserve respect, regardless of Mr. Brindisi's personal opinion of them. I am asking, do you consider this professional and appropriate conduct for a town manager? Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak under public comment? Okay, then, moving right along. Anybody have anything under new business? Oh, yeah, I skipped right over you, Mr. Brindisi. I'm so sorry.
No, not a problem.
Let me back up.
I'm happy to provide my
Please.
town manager's report. So just a few updates for the board. First and
Please.
foremost, tomorrow evening, the Board of Health will be having a public hearing to discuss amendments to the tobacco control regulations. Specifically, they are discussing whether or not to ban the sale of nicotine pouches here in town. So that hearing will take place here in Town Hall tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. for those that are interested. On Thursday at 4:30 at PCIS Middle School Auditorium, again, Thursday, March 6th at 4:30, our director is here, our DPW director and the construction team that will be making the improvements at the Halfway Pond and Long Pond Road intersection will be holding a public information meeting. This invitation has been sent to our chairs of all of our precincts so that they're well aware that, again, we'll be holding this meeting. We'll also have not only DPW officials in the room, but fire and police officials, the contractor, and school officials as well. So again, those that are interested in learning more about the Halfway Pond and Long Pond Road intersection improvements, PCIS at Thursday at 4:30 p.m. In addition, just want the board to be aware that we are moving quickly on the new cemetery on Route 80. We plan to go out to bid in the next couple months, so we'll keep the board posted on who will get that award and make that new cemetery. For those that have been following the Hedges Pond Road development project by E.G. Pontiff, there has been an appeal that's been filed. There will be a hearing on March 17th in front of the ZBA to determine whether or not the building permit is going to remain. And then on March 12th at PCIS, there'll be another public education forum. This one will focus on wildfires. So this will be an interesting event. So this will be held in the PCIS cafeteria at 6:30 on March 12th. We will have officials from the NFPA, from the federal level, from the NFPA wildfire team. We'll have officials from the Department of Fire Services at the state level, officials from the DCR, and then our fire chief and his team will be presenting a number of different topics on environmental restoration, fuel reduction, and as you all know, the fire chief's new initiative, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So this is timely given everything that's happened on the West Coast over the last couple of months, but this wildfire protection plan is something the chief had put into works, working with the Department of Energy and Environment on developing this plan over 6-7 months ago. So again, that'll take place on March 12th. And then I want to thank District Attorney Tim Cruz. He will be contributing $5,000 to cover the expenses of the town's newest comfort dog. The Emergency Management Office has a new comfort dog named Rio. It was part of a program, Puppies for Prisoners. This animal was picked up in northern upper state New York. A couple weeks ago, our EMD, Christian Horvath, will be the animal's host. And again, it's a comfort dog and has already been making the rounds, has gone over to the Veterans Center and other community locations to introduce the dog to the community. So in particular, I want to thank DA Cruz for his contribution of $5,000 to cover these expenses for the coming year. And then last, I just want to bring to the board's attention that there has been an audit locally on our affordable housing count here in town. We believe we have identified approximately 588 affordable housing units here in town that were never submitted to the state. So we plan on submitting, well, those have been now submitted to the state. That'll bring our, assuming it'll be approved by the state, it'll bring our unit count to 1,842, which represents 6.56%. And then, again, as we know, the board signed a agreement for a 40B project with Claremont a few months back. If we assume those 300 units and potentially the 38 units that Pulte will build on Hedges Road, that'll bring our unit count to 2,180 and then increase our percentage to 7.8%. And then, as you all know, Red Brook they have to build 144 units. They just got approved for 62 of those units a couple weeks back with the governor's grant award. Assuming those get built soon, that'll bring our unit count to 2,324 units. So that'll almost bring us to 8.3%. Assuming everything I just described, those affordable units that are in the queue, those that have been recently submitted to the state, will be at 8.3%. As you all know, once we hit 10%, we have reached the metric that the state would require for towns to no longer have to engage in 40B and other affordable unit conversations. So we do know that according to a most recent report that the Cottage project, the 40R project, they're entering their MIPA Phase 3 application, and they have approximately another 375 units that could be contributed towards this 10%. So I guess the silver lining in all of this is that we are getting very close to reaching the 10% goal, and once that is achieved, we can be very targeted as to the types of affordable housing projects we want here in town. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
John?
So, Mr. Brindisi, what is the time frame for getting confirmation from the state that this incremental 588 is accurate?
So I have been told that we have already submitted our application for those 588 units that have not been confirmed yet, and that I've been told it should take a couple weeks. So the way the state moves, I'm going to err on the side of caution and say probably closer to 4 weeks, but we're thinking anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks.
So it's my opinion that once that data is confirmed by the state, we probably should have a follow-up conversation. On the other side of that, it is bizarre that for a decade or two, we've always lamented this law, and we've always been in that 3.5% to 4.5% range. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you have an employee that suddenly discovers that we're not getting credit for almost 600 affordable housing units, which indicates to me a couple of things. But first and foremost, that the individual who discovered that is obviously worth their weight in gold. So I just think coming out the other side, once we have verification from the state that we're finally accurate, that data should go on the website, and at a minimum is updated every quarter. At minimum, every 3 months, it's got to be updated so the public knows exactly where we are. There was a breakdown in the process. That's your job to figure out where that breakdown was so that we learn from that and it never happens again. And the last question I have is, if all of a sudden this is accurate and we're getting credit for an incremental 600, Does that get us some form of safe harbor? Does that get us some form of safe harbor to a potential project that we don't want in the community, that we have an intense dislike for because it doesn't fit into a certain neighborhood or it's just not good overall for the committee? And that's the question that we need answered.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something we certainly will follow up on with the state, given those 600 units that have been found. We do know that there's been 2 applications for 40B projects most recently. So we know the Claremont project would put us in safe harbor. But I think the question is, giving these 600 units, would that put us in safe harbor? So I'll follow up on that.
Absolutely. Derek, the Board of Health seems to be accelerating the rate at which they are proposing bans on things in town. Since I've been on the board, I can remember, they held a public hearing on banning SCARs, the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides on public property. They explored preventing anyone who was born before the year 2000 from purchasing nicotine products in town. Most recently, the styrofoam containers, and now they're talking about banning nicotine pouches. Now, I have to say, I don't use or particularly care about nicotine pouches, but you came up through the public health world. Is it usual for a Board of Health to engage in this level of regulation? And I'll also add, during the I think 3 years that I sat on the Board of Health, they banned cigar bars in town. They increased regulations around where and when nicotine products could be sold. They imposed additional regulations on short-term rentals. So you know, and I'll say this as well, there was talk about even banning gas stoves at one point in time. Right. So is it usual for a Board of Health to engage in this level of regulation?
Given everything you just described, even the last one about gas stoves, in my experience, this is a hyperactive Board of Health that is really looking at public health on many different levels. Some would argue that some of the items that they're debating may not even be public health focused.
Farm animals.
Boards of health have extreme authority. Typically, you see elected boards of health carry out that level of authority, and appointed boards of health are usually, in my experience, working with the other branches of the executive branch, the other committees in the executive branch, in order to really move public policy forward. So this Board of Health, I would say, honestly, is acting more like an elected Board of Health than an appointed Board of Health.
Do you find that problematic in any way?
I find it concerning.
Okay.
I feel disconnected to the work that they're doing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on in this community, and it's difficult on our end, on the administration end, to track everything that's going on a regular basis. You know, we have dozens and dozens of boards and committees. Some have regulatory authority, some don't. And so I think it's a challenge to try to align ourselves with this Board of Health to ensure they're more consistent with the vision of the Select Board and the executive branch.
Is there anything that, perhaps this is a conversation for offline, but should we be exploring the function of the Board of Health in a more in-depth way? And I say this knowing that I'm probably volunteering myself for such work.
I think over the last 3+ years, we have put everything on the table. We're looking at all of our policies, as you know. You know, we've reorganized multiple departments. We've changed our municipal finance philosophy. So I think what you suggest falls in that same trend, that no stone should be left unturned, and that we should be looking at other ways of doing business across the spectrum of the organization.
Thank you, Will. I'm happy to discuss more after.
Any other questions or comments for the town manager? Thank you. New business? Letters? Old business? I just have a couple things. One's new old, but, well, Mr. Coyle's still here. And I don't expect you to have an answer, but I just want to really find out where we are as a town with the traffic issues on Long Pond Road. Have we started to do a study, or are we waiting for funding, or waiting for the state? Because it's something that this board needs to discuss soon, with what I'm hearing from people and seeing and being in traffic, And it's off the cuff, so, I mean.
I can, Mr. Chairman, I will look into that. I can tell you that myself and James have been out to several intersections, and we have made some timing adjustments to try to improve how they function. It seems as though there's been some benefit, but I can research what else can be done and what potential funding mechanisms there are for those improvements. So I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't expect you to have it, but while you were sitting here.
No, absolutely.
All right. Mr. Blitzer?
Mr. Chairman, I have some new business. Last night, it was brought to my attention, I wasn't there, but it was brought to my attention that there were some folks came in protesting at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I was told that they were very disruptive, very disrespectful, and the last person under public comment tonight mentioned about being respectful, and, well, the respect should go both ways. Folks that want to come in before our boards and our committees should treat those boards and committees with respect as well. So I talked to our clerk about what do we have for laws, bylaws about protesting in a public building, and I was told that we don't have them right now. So we need to, I'm asking the town manager, could we look into putting some policies together so in place? So if something like that happens again, that we know, if they're breaking a bylaw or a law, that we can have them removed from the town hall. So we need to, I think we need to come up with those policies. So.
Yeah, we can talk offline, Mr. Blitzer, and think about some ways to maintain a level of decorum.
Because it works both ways.
That's
okay?
right.
We deserve respect, and our boards and committees deserve respect too. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, and I'm just going to finish up under my old business. Just want to let you all know that I want to keep pursuing the energy needs of our residents. I know there's a lot going on nationally, and I'm not looking for, but I want to keep digging and see what the actuals are, and get the discussion open on maybe a municipal power plant, and a lot of green projects I think are coming our way also. But it worth opening conversation with the state, and we'll know where it takes us, and maybe it takes us nowhere. But I just think it should be a priority. And the other thing that's really concerning me, and Derek might be able to touch to it, is the climate resiliency. We're going to shore up around the state boat ramp in the parking lot. The quick scenario is they're going to raise the parking lot, I think, 3 feet, and there's going to be a wall, and I'm not sure the height is either 12 or 14 feet. And it'll go behind the wastewater treatment plant, and it's going to go along the walkway there, the breakway, and around to the harbor master shack. So that leaves the rest of the Water Street in, was it 10 years, underwater. So I think it needs to be, yeah, looked at now, and we need to have discussions and plan for the future. It's not gonna happen next year, I don't think, but I'm believing it's about 10 years, 2030, 2035, 5 years. So
50.
we need to start talking about it then. Because what good is building the wall around a quarter of the street when the water's just gonna go around it and, you know, be
Right.
on the other side of the wall, you're gonna have an expensive swimming pool. So I think we need to get the right departments in here and start having discussions how we shore that up and let town meet know what, you know, really coming up, so we can do our funds and priorities accordingly. That's all I have. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for watching. Have a nice week.